Welcome to the Demystifying the Music Industry panel. We're going to talk about and acknowledge the additional barriers we face as people from marginalised backgrounds as the start of our journeys into the music industry. For example, how to navigate the early years successfully, best practices, who, what, where, and when you need to think about building a team around you, and how much stuff costs. So let's introduce ourselves. I'm Lily. I'm a singer-songwriter and producer. My band is called Sunflower Thieves, and I work with Come Play With Me as a project manager for our Come Platform Me course for people from marginalised backgrounds who want to work in the music industry. Would you like to introduce yourselves? We'll start with Josh.
Yeah, shall I go first? Hey guys, I'm Josh Daniel. I am the head of Interval Records. We're a universal music label under EMI North based in Newcastle. And I also own a company called JD Media Group. We have 2 artists and a writer-producer signed for management. And we also do creative consulting for music and technology companies.
Hi everyone. Hi everyone, I'm Cils Williams. I am a tour coordinator and music agent at A2C Live. I tend to work on the alternative K-pop side of things, so that's me.
Hi, I'm Martha Cleary. I'm based down in Brighton. I run a management company called Glow Artists that looks after predominantly jazz-leaning acts, sort of jazz soul, jazz electronic. But I also do radio plugging and PR and consultancy, mostly for independent artists and independent labels, just trying to, I guess, constantly trying to demystify the music industry for people who want to exist in it.
Hi everyone, my name is Pete Bott. I am a partner and head of music at Black Solicitors. We're a Leeds-based firm. I'm a music specialist. Much like the rest on this panel, my job really is to spend a lot of my time demystifying the music industry, particularly around record contracts, publishing contracts, management, and anything legal that relates to music.
Lovely. I think, Pete, you just explained your job quite well in that, but do you two want to maybe explain a little bit about what your role is? And Martha, you kind of did as well. Do you want to just quickly try and round up like label manager work and what that means?
So I guess my role at the label is I kind of oversee the full operation of Interval Records. So I have a team of 3 staff, 2 across A&R, 1 across marketing. We feed into EMI North and Universal Music in London. So we do the full process, so the A&R, the scouting, the actual campaign management, the supply chain, distribution. So we do sort of the full end-to-end, and I kind of oversee the full operation.
Amazing.
Cool. In a nutshell, I think a live music agent's job is to develop a live career of an artist, basically. So, our jobs are to find the right team in terms of promoters, build their careers, start them from the grassroots and hopefully get them to arena level. Also, getting them onto festivals, which is what most people want these days, the pressure. But so that's it in a nutshell, pretty much.
And then from a manager's perspective, we work closely with the artist to coordinate between all of these different teams of people. So I described it as a food chain the other day, but I think an ecosystem might work a bit better if you think of it as, an artist as a starting point. And I come from a label background, so I kind of came into it there, and I remember piecing together, for instance, the difference between a booking agent and a promoter, which took me far too long to distinguish between the two. But it's like, so if you've got your artist, you've got label, legal teams, publishers, booking agents, the promoters that work with the booking agents, the venues that work with the promoters. And yeah, from a management point of view, it's about kind of taking what the artist has created and wants to do and finding the correct people to develop them and make that happen. And in some cases, in this day and age, that might mean working, with the right label or it might even mean working with sort of label services, so direct distributors or radio pluggers or PRs, so the artist can kind of more self-release. And then also, you know, Josh and I both manage, and I feel like therapist, minder, friend also comes under the title of manager.
Amazing.
So Lily, if I could just interrupt you briefly.
Go for it, Pete.
I think I just wanted to add at the start of this as well that I think a lot of people imagine professionals like lawyers and accountants to be quite sort of, I suppose, like dry, suited people that just sort of sit in offices and review paperwork. And I suppose in some other areas that may be true to an extent. But almost just to echo what you said, Martha, about being sort of friends, advisors, shoulders to cry on, etc. Music lawyers are a little bit like that as well. So I see myself as much more, I suppose, like the legal advisor to an artist's business. I'm very much involved in speaking to the artists about their careers, their priorities, connecting people. I spend a lot of time speaking, a bit like management. I work very closely with my clients' managers to speak to labels and publishers and all sorts of different people, because I'm dealing with all of these people all the time. So a music lawyer's job is not just to review contracts. It's very much a kind of commercial legal advisor that gets involved in all sorts of different things too.
Can I add to that as well? Lawyers are low-key A&Rs. I don't think people realise this. A lot of the time we get suggestions about artists through lawyers, actually, that we work with. And they're like, great bands or great artists, you should check them out. And some of us end up signing those artists. So yeah, low-key A&Rs, lawyers.
Yeah, I want to second that, because my band, Sunflower Thieves, we actually got a lawyer before we got a manager. And it often happens like that, doesn't it? It's, yeah, who you know and like passing you on to people, and if they like you enough, they'll pass you on.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the things I wanted to emphasize today is that all of us will work together. So most artists, certainly at a point, will have an agent, a label, a manager, a lawyer, an accountant, a publisher, etc., etc. And the most successful artists will have a joined up team that meet regularly. Cils and I were talking that I work with a band that's managed by a management company that shares a building with her agency. So we will speak, we'll go for drinks, we'll chat, we'll share ideas, share tips. So we try to work together.
Amazing. Cool. Shall we start with some questions? So Martha, as an artist manager, what would you say is the best practice for releasing music?
It depends on the artist is a total cop-out answer that I'm not going to leave you with. I think in terms of best practice for releasing music, you know, a lot of artists contact me and, you know, maybe they're getting in contact with me about management because they want to find a label, but they haven't released any music yet. They don't really know what label they want to be signed to. They don't necessarily know how they fit into the music scene or what they want to be. And often to those artists, I encourage them to self-release something first. Where I, you know, on management head-on, it's sort of about having quite a structured campaign more than anything. I am a big believer in release timelines and planning music releases as far in advance as possible. And I feel like everyone on this panel would agree with that because it makes all of our jobs way easier. But I think, you know, whether that's with a label or self-releasing, I think just being able to implement structure in what you're doing is the best thing to do when it comes to releasing music. So if you're an independent artist, you know, that might be that you put something out in the world and you self-release it and you just promote it through your socials or through BBC Introducing or through whatever contacts you have. And then you kind of see, okay, that did this well. What do I need to get it up here? And I think sometimes, you know, artists are fully formed earlier on. You know, there are plenty of bands and musicians that I know that have a really strong live angle but have only put one song out. But I think it's just about, when it comes to releasing music, just finding your footing in terms of you know, what's the best starting block for you. Because if you're contacting labels or contacting management, and kind of, sadly, this is the way it is, but it's like, it's all a bit chicken and egg. Like, you want a label to be able to release your music, but a label might want to see how your released music is already done. In terms of management, it's like, I would love to work with as many artists as possible, but also I'm not a manager that has capacity with really developing artists. So it's like, I can offer consultancy up to a point, but you kind of need to have done a bit of the work yourself. So yeah, I think just like having a bit of a clear structure and like goals broadly, great. If that goal is to be the cover artist for New Music Friday in your first year of releasing music, that might be trickier. But just to have a kind of general awareness of the landscape, where you want to fit, and some structure around that is a very broad, weird way of answering that question, I think.
Yeah, that is like, from label perspective, that's a big plus for us as well, because I think, as Martha said, sometimes artists kind of start at the very beginning and believe that the first step should be, how do I find a record label? And actually, by getting that experience first, and starting to figure it out a little bit for yourself, then it's a massive plus for us if we start working with an artist and they have an understanding of who they want to be. We take a bit of an old school approach to A&R, so we actually do work with artists that are a little bit earlier on, which is not typical for sort of major labels and subsidiaries. But definitely getting that early experience and figuring out who you are and who you want to be will really help you when you come into those label conversations.
Yeah, definitely. I agree with all of that. Well done, everyone. I also wanted to ask, I feel like it's quite a bit of a preconception, is that the right word? When if an artist really wants to work with a manager and they think, when I've got a manager, I'll won't have to do as much.
The artist always has to be the hardest worker. I think it's definitely something that artists feel. As soon as I sign with a live agent, I'm going to have a full diary. As soon as I have a manager, it'll all come together. As soon as I have a label, I'll be on New Music Friday and my streams will be astronomical, and it just isn't the case. Like, the artist, your team can't want it more than you. Like, you have to be the driving force.
We're all good at our jobs, but we're not miracle workers, or indeed the artists in this case. And I think as well, it's that thing of like, why people want a manager is a question that I've encountered a few times. Like, and I think the same goes, when it comes to lawyers, labels, and booking agents as well. There's this question of like, an artist starting out and kind of having the tick box team around them. And don't get me wrong, I've encountered situations where artists have said to me, that people don't want to have conversations with them, they want to have conversations with their management because they'll feel that they'll be taken more seriously. And I think that's, a tricky part of the industry. But at the same time, it's kind of like, we're here to work with artists. And yeah, you can't expect to kind of hand over to a manager and for things to just sort of magically start happening. Like, there needs to be some drive in some direction. Because also at the end of the day, like, I can't imagine an artist coming to me and just being like, yeah, cool, do whatever. It's fine. I'll just do whatever you tell me. Because also it's not my vision for a career. It's theirs at the end of the day.
For sure. I think also, getting a team on board actually probably means you need to work 10 times harder to keep everyone on board and keep everyone wanting to work with you. Cool. Anyone else got anything to add on that one? Okay. Josh, I feel like there's quite a lot of talk about the role of labels nowadays, being more reactive rather than proactive. Waiting for artists to blow up on social media before reaching out to work with them. I know that's not how your label works, but do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think many moons ago, record labels were in a completely different position because the route to market was a few key gatekeepers in the worlds of television, radio, and physical retailers. And so labels literally had the power to say, we're going to take this artist, we're going to package it correctly, and then providing we pull those three levers, it was pretty much guaranteed that the label had the power to make that artist something. Where obviously now we're in a position where it isn't a few gatekeepers anymore, and there's no barrier to entry because any artist can release from their bedroom. Downside being obviously that the market's now really saturated, and so that leaves everybody saying, well, what do labels actually do? And I think, majors are in a position where a lot of signing artists is just investment, and I think they look for safer investment for the most part, which means that if an artist can already demonstrate that they're getting some traction, it's a safer investment, and they're at a better, sort of more suitable position to then pull the levers that they can pull to amplify that. And they sort of have international reach with offices in most countries. So then that's kind of the approach that they take. My label's quite different. I felt very strongly when I started the label that I really wanted us to do it the opposite way. I didn't want to sign any TikTok songs, God help me. I was like, I really want to take artists who I believe have genuine global commercial viability but aren't there yet, and I want to go on that journey with them for a couple of years, for a few years, and see where we can get them to. So we take a very different approach to, I think, what a lot of people would think a major label would do, but it's down to each label. I started my journey as an artist first, and songwriter, so I kind of come from the perspective of an artist and understand the frustrations that they have, and I understand how frustrating it can be to feel like you're really onto something, but because you haven't had a song be used 175 bazillion times on TikTok, nobody wants to take the time of day to listen. So yeah, we very much kind of take a sort of old school approach to it.
Yeah, that's great. What do you look for in an artist before signing them?
Yeah, I think Martha kind of touched on this, but I think for me, I really like to know, first and foremost, the talent has to speak to me. So I've really got to feel passionately that, I've got to really believe in the artist, and I've got to really feel like the talent is of a certain standard. I think very closely after that, I need to know that the artist is actually nice to work with, which sounds insanely simple, but there's actually nothing worse than working with someone who is not enjoyable to be around, is not down to earth and polite, and if there's ego involved, like anything that creates that friction, especially because, part of my role is I have a lot of conversations with other partners. As these guys have mentioned, we communicate with lawyers, we work with DSPs, so we're talking to Apple, we're talking to Spotify, we're talking to YouTube, and we're pitching our artists. If we don't trust that we can take that artist into a conversation and then represent the label well, then that's something that is a bit of a red flag for me. So just being a good person, a decent person, nice to be around, and talent, that's the two things for me at the top. I think everything else can kind of be taught. Social numbers don't particularly matter to me. Engagement doesn't particularly matter to me because I think marketing strategy and digital strategy can be taught, and that's what our teams are there for. So I think as long as you're showing all of the early signs of everything I mentioned before that, I think the rest we can guide you on everything else.
Can I just add to that as well? So I come from an indie label background, and I would say that those labels and those A&Rs are very much still out there, as Josh has been saying, in terms of just wanting to sign people whose music they believe in. And, a lot of that is done through like key tastemakers support still. I had a conversation about an artist I work with who was signed to the label I used to work for the other day, and they were worried because his new album might be too commercially viable, and they're concerned that it might alienate the underground audience of the label, which wasn't an issue I've ever heard of before, that too many people might like this record. But what I will say is that within that, there are real people who are real music fans, and I have been saying this since I sort of went freelance, like this idea of being a good person in the music industry and chatting to the right people and being nice and being friendly and being good at what you do, sometimes that, whether you're an artist or on behind the scenes, is such a huge key part of it. But the flip side of that just I want to say very quickly as well, is that sometimes, you know, a label can do everything a label can do, but also, you know, an artist might need to be gigging, might need to be playing live, might need to be keeping up their socials, might need to be making merch. And it's kind of, you know, again, with the we're not miracle workers thing, it's that, like, you know, one part in this bigger ecosystem of all of it. Yeah. And
just to jump again on something Martha said there about, you know, being nice to be around. I think sometimes it's also about, and to be honest, like, hopefully you just are this person, and so you don't have to put it on. But it's about just like giving people the time of day, even if there's nothing that they can do for you right now, because that shouldn't matter. You shouldn't only be lying for the people in the room who you feel like can do something for your career. And I think one of the artists that we signed last year, I actually first met that artist about 14 years before, in a completely different context. And at that point in time, I could do absolutely nothing for the artist. My career was in a completely different place. And 14 years later, it went full circle and we signed that artist, and I was the one that gave him his first major deal. So I think that in itself is something that sticks with me, because I remembered the exchanges I had with that artist, and I remembered the exchanges fondly. So I already felt a warmth towards the artist, because I knew that he'd been doing his thing for a long time, and he was going about things the right way 14 years ago. So I already felt like we were in a good spot. So it's just like, yeah, being that from the start, you know.
Yeah, that's really cool. Pete?
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a bit of a cliche to say it, but it is a small world. And so you find that you'll meet people, and then you might not see them again for a few years, and your paths cross again. So yeah, you just got to look out for those relationships. The one thing I just wanted to add in terms of the label point is, I feel quite a lot of people feel overwhelmed as independent artists with the options. You know, it's great to have these sort of routes to market where you can make a tune in your bedroom and put it out. But then I think a lot of people feel overwhelmed. You know, I need to be across all these different social media platforms. There are all these different label options, major, independent, et cetera, et cetera. So what I'd always encourage new artists to do, and it comes back to, think, a point Martha made earlier, is really focus in on who you are as an artist. What is it you're trying to get across? And rather than trying to be everywhere all at once right from the start and stretching yourself too thin, try and identify perhaps a bit of a community of other similar artists, maybe some other labels, trying to figure out who you are as an artist and where you might sit in the overall music market. I think that kind of reduces that sense of overwhelm, and I think will also help provide you with a bit of a kind of a route forward where you think, well, you know, I'm not a major artist, so frankly, I don't need to spend time looking at the, you know, speaking to A&Rs at Universal or wherever. You know, this is my lane. I think that's probably an easier way to try and make some progress.
Yeah, amazing. Thanks, guys. Yeah, carrying on from the being nice thing, Cils, I've heard that it helps to get a promoter on side first before reaching out to booking agents. Would you agree with that? And like, how would an artist know that they're ready to get a booking agent?
I think yes and no. It works both ways. There have been times when promoters have come to like the place that I work at and just been like, oh, there's like a local band. We're in Leeds, so I'll use Leeds as an example. There's a local band in Leeds who are just sold out the Brudenell or whatever, and we think that ATC is the right home for them, looking at the roster and stuff like that. So like, can you guys check this out? Usually if it comes from like a promoter that we know and work with a lot, we tend to put it in our A&R, which we do weekly, and have a listen, and if someone's interested, then they reach out to the promoter, and it sort of happens that way. But then as agents, we do a lot of our own A&Ring. Not necessarily does the artist have a promoter in place. It might just be something that we've come across, or, you know, our algorithm was working hard that day and brought it to our attention. So like, you know, it's like a bit of a two-way thing sometimes. Like, yeah, the agents might find the artist, and they don't even have a team, like they don't have a promoter in place or anything. And then we will be like, okay, let's try and put some promoters in place.
Yeah, for sure. I guess similar to Pete, what you were saying about lawyers being able to, it's kind of a chain, but also it doesn't have to be that way. It can be all different.
Yeah, I mean, I think if
journeys.
there was just one route that it always worked, we'd all know it and follow it. So yeah, it's difficult to say, isn't it?
Yeah, and also, how do you find artists that you work with, or do you like find them at gigs, or is it just lots of different ways?
I guess for me personally, my artists are all based in Korea, so like it's quite hard to see them. So I actually like K-pop and stuff, and I am really interested in Korean culture. So I guess naturally, I just, like I said, my algorithm is just like, hey, check this out, and then it turns out to be actually something that's really cool and has no team in place. So like, which is great for me. So yeah, it's just more, like I said, my algorithm is algorithming, and also just because I work with a lot of Korean artists, I guess a lot of the people in that industry are actually just talking now, and they're seeing how active my bands are, and they're like, who is responsible for this?
Yeah.
And then they sort of reach out to me, or, you know, I tend to go to Korea quite a lot, so I'm meeting people there too. And then they're like, oh, I have this band, can you check him out? And yeah, so I guess when you sort of find your niche type of thing, people will naturally come to you, like when you find your sort of like community, so to speak.
Yeah.
So I don't think many people are doing alternative K-pop, apart from me. So yeah, so I tend to get a lot of that.
You
thrown
found
my
your
way.
niche.
So yeah.
Sick. Cool. Pete, you work with some huge bands, Bring Me the Horizon, While She Sleeps, and Nubian Twist. But for artists starting out, I think the idea of getting a lawyer involved is quite scary, because we don't have any money. However, from personal experience, music lawyers don't take money off you personally, and only will if there's like advances from labels or distributors involved. Is that always the case, like for artists starting out with every lawyer, or from your perspective?
Yeah, it's this difficult one, really. I mean, as I said, my position really is to try and advise clients and be part of that kind of overall career building, working alongside managers and others that similar to what's on this panel. And this is a typical lawyer answer. It depends. It really does depend. So I will always do my best. So if I'm doing a record deal, I'll do my best to try and get that record label to make a contribution to fees in the hope that those fees will be covered in full. The artist doesn't need to pay it out of their pockets. Usually those contributions are recoupable, which means that the label will ultimately recover it. So it's basically the artist is not paying it up front. But then it does really depend. You know, labels are not always willing to make a contribution. And then also other times you might need advice when it's not signing a deal. So, you know, I get involved when there's disputes. I get involved when agencies go bust, that we were talking about earlier. So there are lots of other circumstances where artists need legal advice, and there's not always an appropriate third party to cover those fees. That having been said, my background is as an artist. So I used to be part of the Leeds scene many years ago, signed to a label called 679. And I really clearly remember someone saying, well, you need to get a music lawyer, and thinking, why do I need a lawyer? Am I in trouble? And then the others saying, well, you know, getting this advice is going to cost you a few £100s. And I was thinking, wow, well, I'd rather spend that on a new amp. So why am I going to pay this person? I guess that overall, you're trying to think of we all come to this for music. That's the kind of priority. But this is a music business. And if you want to kind of progress and have a career, you've got to start thinking about it like you are the owner-manager of your own business. You're bringing on managers, labels, agents, lawyers, etc., to help you grow that business, help you run that business. But it is a business, and there are business costs. And really, all of us on here, we need to get paid. But the idea is that we're adding value to what you do. So There was a manager very earlier in my career who made that comment to me. He said, well, I'm happy to pay a lawyer because the idea is I pay a lawyer and I get a better deal, which makes me more money in the long term. So again, I think there's a degree maybe of just thinking about it like that. I'm a business advisor. I'll do my best to keep fees to minimum, to do my best to get someone else to pay them. But at a certain point, you've got to invest in your own career. You've got to bring experts on to help you move that forward. And yeah, it might cost you money from time to time. The only other thing I would add as well is that I know part of the question was like, at what point do each of us get involved? And I would say as a lawyer, I'm really happy to speak to artists at very early stages. And that might be, we chat. Here today, we've got a stand over there. You can meet me and my colleague May. Or it could be that you follow up after this with an email or a call and we just have a chat. And there's no obligation, there's nothing more than that. Because I think with each of us, like we said, you build long-term relationships. I've been working with Bring Me the Horizon for 12 years now. So these things take time and you build the relationships, build the understanding, and things like fees and so on, I think they come along naturally at the right time.
And also to add to that, I don't know what the sort of mix is in the room of like artist to music professional, but it goes without saying that we all need lawyers in this industry, and that as much as we strive to work with good people who are true to their word, etc., etc., there are a reason that agreements exist within almost every relationship in the industry. So like as a manager, I still don't have legal agreements in place with my artists, which I shouldn't admit in front of a lawyer. But that's partly because I've known them for a very long time. But that's also partly because, getting the right agreement in place at the right time, at the right financial time for them as well is a huge part of it. But agreements with labels, there's always a lot of terms there. You're making a deal where you hope all parties will stay true to each other throughout the terms of the deal. However, that's not always the case. So it's good to remember that in all aspects of the music industry, as much as being a good person is a key part, getting legal advice is also a really key part of that.
Thank you very much. That's a good promo for me.
Amazing. Cool. I think, has anyone got any questions? Hands up if you do.
Who's going to do the first one?
Come on. Martha's also a radio plugger, if that changes anything. Cool, we've got some questions. Shall I do the mic? I'm doing the mic. There you go.
Hello. Wow. This question's for you, Cils. I was wondering, when you're considering artists as a booking agent, are you often judging based on live footage? How do you there's a lot of, professional studio footage and moving image and stuff, and obviously live footage. I've always wondered how much that's important in live show reels and things for live situations.
For me personally, live footage isn't that important because you can make something look good. I like to try and see the shows if I can, but again, Korea's quite far. So I just have to trust my gut. So I'm someone that will only work with an artist who I would actually want to pay to see, if that makes sense. I don't want to lie either. Like sometimes I'll see it, like I won't say names, but there was an agent that I used to work with, and she would just watch like the football at the back of the show, like. And then at the end, would meet the band and be like, brilliant, like, that was great. And to me, she'd be like, this was terrible. Like, so, and I don't want to do that. That's just not my vibe. I don't want to lie to the artist. So I generally will only work with bands that I will pay to see and will actually say, like, I really enjoyed it. Sometimes I might be like, oh, I'll give them feedback and be like, oh, that show was a bit weird, or like, but it was still enjoyable for me, type thing. But I think having live footage is really, really good. Obviously agents are really pretty active, especially most agencies are based in London. So agents do go to shows. If you can, do try and invite them. Obviously, I know it's a bit of a different situation being based in Leeds, but that's where having a promoter would come in place to sort of like vouch for you and be like, oh, there's a great band, check out this footage. That usually helps too. So I hope that answers your question.
Hiya. I'm just wondering, Pete, how like contracts work with lawyers and whether you work with them on sort of a consultation basis, or whether like how you know if you're working with them for the long term, if they're part of your team, you know.
Okay, thanks. So generally speaking, I work with clients on a kind of, there's no obligation to continue using me. So you could come and we'd have a discussion about something you might need help with. I would talk to you about it, give you some ideas, give you a fee estimate if that was appropriate. Sometimes it can be easily resolved and I can just answer the question there and then. But if you want to instruct me, then we'd agree on that. I would deal with that thing for you. If after that you want to move on and use a different lawyer, you could do that. So there's really no obligation to continue using a lawyer once you start instructing them. Having said that, I think there is a benefit to growing a relationship with the lawyer, much like we've discussed a few times on this panel already. Getting to know people is helpful. So before this panel, I had a call with a new client and we were discussing her and her manager was looking for a publisher. So we're just talking about some ideas. This isn't a deal we're going to do probably till, I don't know, second half of this year. So that's something we're kind of thinking about, but it helps me when I'm going out and meeting people to kind of mention that writer and have those kind of conversations. So I think there's a benefit to a long-term relationship, getting to know artists and lawyer, because more opportunities can often come from that. The second thing I would say is that I have some clients, I don't just act for artists, so I act for record labels, I act for managers, and in those cases, they have more of a kind of regular requirement for work. So I do have like retainer arrangements with those clients, but that's more rare for artists. That's more for kind of more the industry side of things. Does that answer your question? Thanks.
Thank you. I was just wondering how important social media was for bands, and if you look at their social media presence and that influences your decision whether to work with them, and if you guys are involved with that at all.
I feel like I'll take this one because every conversation I have with artists about social media, I apologise before telling them that they need to post on social media. I feel bad for saying to artists that you sort of do need social media, but I think in this day and age, I think it's possible. Everything is possible. It's possible to do all of this without having a presence online. But I think it's helpful to have a presence online. I am also, as well as management, I do radio plugging, and even within that, I encourage artists, if you get any type of support, any type of radio play, any type of co-sign, share it, shout about it. As a manager, it will always be something I'm not a TikTok user. That would have been bad for my brain if I'd have ever gone near it. But I do go on artists' Instagram pages. Not even I'm not that fussed about numbers, but I'll go to see if, I guess it goes right back to one of the first points I make. I'll go to sort of see if they know who they are and what they're doing. And that might be that they post very rarely. That might be that they post often and it's all about, co-signs that they've got or support that they've had, or maybe it's just live gigs, or maybe it's their personal Instagram is mashed with their artist Instagram. But I think it's almost for me as much about getting an idea of who they are as an artist, and also how comfortable they are to use their platform to promote themselves. So it again feeds into that idea of we can't be doing all of the work for an artist. They need to sort of be flying that flag themselves as well. So I guess in terms of socials, that could be a way of thinking about it, that it's more about you know, for some people, like with streaming, there will be a point where they're looking at your numbers and they might make decisions based on that. But I also think that, you know, if people look at your social media and get an idea of who you are as an artist, that's almost more important, I would say.
And just to add, I would say, like, find your space and find what works for you, because it might be the case that you might not have posted anything on Instagram for or TikTok, for example, for 3 months, but it might be because you're a prolific live streamer, which one of the artists I used to manage was exactly his bag. He used to go live every single night, and that's where his community was. So again, like, from a label or a management perspective, it's not that we would immediately be turned off by the fact that you aren't posting or having this sort of really obvious engagement via Reels or TikTok, but actually if you can point us to where your community is and demonstrate that that's where your fan base gathers. Or you might turn around and be like, well, I've only got 1,000 followers on Instagram, but I've actually got 400 hardcore fans in my WhatsApp or in my Discord, and that's where we do our thing. Then, like, I think that's more important than, like, necessarily just having outward visibility. I think everybody's so kind of focused on, like, how do we get the viral video? How do we get my views from 500 to 500k? How do I get, and you're always looking for new eyes, but then I feel like nobody really nurtures the fans that they already have. And I think part of my journey, I come from a business background as well. So I've worked in other industries, building companies outside of music and selling companies. And so in e-commerce, for example, it's something that's really important. It's understanding your customer, and it's not just looking for new customers. It's like, how do we take the customers we've already got and upsell and make more money from the existing customers? And so you can align that with music and think, how do we get those die-hard fans to, yeah, they might spend £5 a month on my Patreon, but how can I get a £20 vinyl sale out of them and get them to also buy a ticket and get them to also buy so I think it's that as well, figuring that part of it out.
Can I add to that, if that's all right? Sorry, I'm so sorry. I know this is not necessarily going to answer your question, but from an agent's perspective, I will say sometimes it's not necessarily how many followers or what you do on social media, but it's who's following you. Because I know during our A&R sessions, we look at an artist and then we go onto their Instagram and it's like, oh, XYZ from like CAA are following, like someone from Wasserman's following. Oh, it seems, so it kind of, when we notice other agents are following that particular act, it kind of is like an indication like this act is pretty hot. And these are the sort of, basically, this is our competition, like who like they might be talking to, or like who's interested, or who's approached them. So like, I know that doesn't necessarily answer your question, but that it might be worth knowing who's following you. So it's just like, oh, someone from Wasserman's interested. Do you know what I mean? So like, yeah.
I think it like contextualizes an artist as well. Like if I go on an artist's Instagram from like a promo perspective, and maybe like Jam Supernova or someone like that is following them, even, you know, Six Music World, like Deb Grant doing New Music Fix, those things. I'm like, oh, okay, this person has piqued their interest. Wonder why that is. And I would say the two other points very quickly, because I know we're running out of time, is it's all good and well having loads of followers, but if they don't buy your record and they don't show up to gigs, it doesn't mean anything. And then the other thing that I'd say about whether you're using social media for this or when you're emailing, whether it's any version of any of us or anyone in the industry, people are like busy. I was going to say lazy, but no, we're just really busy. And if you can make it as easy as possible for someone to look at you and go, oh, okay, they make this sort of music, they know about this, they've had support from this person, and they're playing here and they've sold out here. If you can do that at a glance, you've just saved all of us like 20 minutes of trawling through the internet that we might not have done. So I think it's just, you know, if like you think of socials or you think of those like pitching emails, never be afraid to reach out to people, but just like make our jobs as easy as possible to say yes to you.
And like on that, think about like things as simple as when you're sending links out, don't send expiring links, because I might not get to it this week or next week or the week after, but if you catch me in a moment where I just go, oh, do you know what, I was going to listen to that, I'll just check it out now while I'm on the train, and I click the link and it's expired, we don't chase artists to say, oh, I'm so sorry that didn't come through, could you please send it again? It's like, you might only get to play that card once, and so just make sure that like all your links work, things again like link trees in your Instagram bios and stuff. What Martha's saying is it's route of least resistance. Help us understand it quickly and help us be able to access everything and make sure that everything you're pointing to works and everything sort of links up.
Yeah, check and double check and send people to check and yeah. Okay, cool. Thank you so much for talking to us and giving us your knowledge and wisdom. That's the end of this panel.